Flight attendant attacked Keanu Reeves in first class. What happened next shocked everyone. What would you do if someone who once saved your life ended up breaking your heart? This is the incredible story of Keanu Reeves, a beloved Hollywood star, and Linda, a flight attendant with a haunting past. A dramatic encounter on Flight 147 from Los Angeles to New York left everyone speechless and revealed a connection neither of them could forget. If you love hearing inspiring and emotional real-life stories like this, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel, Real Life Stories, for more captivating narratives. It was a peaceful September evening in 2024, and the passengers of Flight 147 were settling in for their cross-country journey from Los Angeles to New York. The first-class cabin exuded luxury, buzzing quietly with high-profile individuals, each immersed in their own world. Among the notable passengers was Keanu Reeves, the celebrated actor known not just for his iconic roles, but also for his humility and kindness. Keanu sat near the window in seat 3A, appearing as grounded as ever despite the glamour surrounding him. With a serene expression, he was engrossed in a worn-out book, its faded cover suggesting it had been a companion for many years. He seemed almost oblivious to the occasional glances from fellow passengers, who whispered, excitedly, about sharing a flight with him. For most, the journey was expected to be uneventful, a routine connection between two major cities. The aircraft reached cruising altitude, and the hum of the engines created a calming backdrop. The cabin crew diligently served drinks and ensured passengers were comfortable. But then, just over an hour into the flight, the calm shattered. A sudden commotion erupted near Keanu's seat. Linda, a young flight attendant in her late 20s, stormed down the aisle with an intensity that caught everyone's attention. Her usually composed demeanor was replaced with visible anger and emotion. Without warning, she slapped the book out of Keanu's hands, sending it tumbling to the floor. "How could you?" she cried, her voice trembling with a mix of frustration and pain. Gasps rippled through the cabin as passengers turned their heads, eyes wide in shock. Keanu looked up at her, his expression shifting from confusion to concern. The first-class cabin was now eerily silent, save for the hum of the engines and the faint whispers of passengers trying to make sense of the unfolding drama. For those on board, it felt like a scene from one of Keanu's movies. But this was no script. It was real, raw, and deeply personal. The stage was set for a confrontation that would unravel a story no one could have anticipated. As the book fell to the floor with a quiet thud, the tension in the cabin reached a palpable high. All eyes were on Linda, her hands trembling as her outburst pierced the shocked silence. "How could you?" she repeated, her voice cracking with raw emotion. "You saved my life, but you also ruined it." Keanu Reeves, known for his calm and collected demeanor, sat frozen for a moment, his expression a mix of confusion and concern. Slowly, he leaned forward, his kind eyes searching hers. "I'm sorry," he said softly, his voice barely audible over the hum of the engines. "Do I know you?" Linda's face crumpled and tears welled in her eyes. "You don't remember me, do you?" she asked, her voice breaking. 15 years ago you found me on a dark road in Ohio. I was lost, scared, and alone. You helped me. You gave me hope, but then you disappeared, and I was left to pick up the pieces on my own." Gasps rippled through the cabin again as passengers leaned in, riveted by the unfolding drama. Keanu's brow furrowed as he sat back, clearly trying to piece together her words. "Ohio? The runaway?" he whispered, his voice tinged with disbelief. A memory seemed to surface, and his expression shifted first to recognition, then to heartbreak. Linda's words poured out, her voice trembling but steady as she continued. "I was 14 years old. My family was falling apart. One night, I couldn't take it anymore and ran away. I was wandering alone, terrified, when you found me. You stopped your motorcycle and told me I wasn't alone anymore. You helped me find a place to stay, a family who promised to look after me. And you promised you'd come back the next day to check on me. But you never did." Keanu's face fell, the weight of her words hitting him like a blow. "Linda, he began, but she cut him off. "You don't understand," she said, her voice rising. "I waited for you. I believed you. But after a few days, that family didn't want me anymore. I ended up back on the streets, feeling more abandoned than ever. I needed you, Keanu. I needed someone to keep their promise, but you never came back." Tears streamed down her face now, and her pain was so raw that it left the cabin silent, the passengers too stunned to intervene. Even the flight attendants stood back, unsure of how to handle the situation. Keanu leaned forward, his voice shaking. "Linda, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to break that promise. I thought you were safe. The family we called, they assured me you'd be okay. But the next day I got a call. My best friend had died suddenly, and He paused, his voice cracking. "I was consumed by my own grief. I wasn't thinking clearly, and I didn't follow through the way I should have." Linda's shoulders sagged as her anger began to waver, replaced by a deep sadness. "Do you know what it feels like to be let down by someone you trusted? To believe for one brief moment that someone cared, only to find yourself alone again?" Her voice softened, her vulnerability on full display. "I saw you on the screen, years later. The man everyone admires, the man who's kind to everyone. And I wondered, was it all an act?" Keanu shook his head, his voice filled with regret. "It's not an act, Linda. I've made mistakes, so many mistakes, but I never stopped caring about you. I thought you were safe, and I'm so sorry I failed you." The tension in the first-class cabin was so thick it felt like no one dared to breathe. A middle-aged woman sitting behind them dabbed her eyes with a tissue, while a young man across the aisle clenched his jaw, visibly moved by the exchange. "I don't know why I lashed out tonight," Linda admitted, her voice trembling. "Maybe I just needed you to know how much that night changed me, and how much it hurt when you didn't come back." Keanu reached out cautiously, his hand hovering uncertainly before gently resting on hers. "Maybe this is my chance to make it right," he said, his voice low but filled with sincerity. "I can't undo the pain I caused you, but I want to try. If you'll let me." Linda hesitated, her walls still firmly in place, but Keanu's sincerity was undeniable. She looked at him, her tear-filled eyes searching his face for any sign of insincerity. What she saw wasn't just regret. It was a quiet, desperate hope to help her heal. The cabin crew finally stepped in, gently suggesting they move to the galley for privacy, but the passengers, now deeply invested in the unfolding story, protested quietly, unwilling to miss what felt like the most authentic human moment they had ever witnessed. Keanu and Linda rose and made their way to the galley. Their voices became muffled, leaving the cabin in stunned silence. What had started as a shocking confrontation was now evolving into something far more profound. A collision of past wounds and a chance for redemption that no one on board would forget. In the cramped galley at the back of the plane, Keanu Reeves and Linda stood face to face, the tension between them almost tangible. Linda's hands trembled as she leaned against the counter, her emotions boiling over after years of silence. Meanwhile, Keanu, known for his poise and humility, appeared vulnerable, his normally stoic demeanor replaced by a mix of guilt and regret. Keanu's voice was soft, almost hesitant as he began. "Linda, I remember that night now. I was riding my motorcycle when I saw you, this scared teenager walking alone. You looked so lost, and I couldn't just leave you there. I did what I could to get you to safety. I thought I was helping." His voice cracked slightly, and he ran a hand through his hair. "I thought the family we called would take care of you. I never imagined—" Linda interrupted, her tone sharp but laced with pain. "You never imagined? That's the problem, Keanu. You didn't think. You made a promise, and I believed you. I waited for you, day after day, hoping you'd come back. But you didn't. That family gave me shelter for a few nights, but after that, they sent me on my way. Do you know what that felt like? To go from feeling seen and cared for to being abandoned all over again?" Keanu's expression shifted from sorrow to deep anguish. "I didn't forget about you, Linda. I swear. But the next day, I got a call. My best friend, he died suddenly, and His voice faltered and he took a shaky breath. I didn't handle it well. I was drowning in grief and I let everything else fall apart. I should have gone back for you, but I didn't. I failed you, and for that I'm so sorry. Linda's eyes filled with fresh tears, her voice trembling as she replied, You don't understand, Keanu. You were my lifeline that night. For the first time, someone made me feel like I mattered, like I wasn't invisible. And then you disappeared, just like everyone else in my life. I carried that pain for years, thinking maybe I wasn't worth saving after all. Keanu stepped closer, his voice raw with emotion. No, Linda. Don't ever think that. You mattered then, and you matter now. I see that now more than ever. But I know my words don't mean much after all this time. I can't change the past, but I want to make it right. Please, let me try. The weight of his words hung in the air, and for a moment Linda's anger seemed to waver. She looked away, her shoulders slumping as if the years of carrying her pain had finally become too much. Do you know what it's like, she said softly, to lose faith in people? To think that no one will ever care enough to stick around? For years, I thought you were just another person who let me down. Keanu's eyes glistened with unshed tears as he listened. I don't blame you for feeling that way, he said. You have every right to be angry with me. But please believe me when I say it was never my intention to hurt you. If I could go back and do things differently, I would in a heartbeat. As their exchange continued, the murmurs in the first-class cabin grew louder. Passengers whispered to one another, their curiosity and emotions evident. A woman in her 40s dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, while a young man across the aisle sat with his arms crossed, his jaw clenched in an attempt to contain his feelings. Even the flight attendants, who had been trying to maintain their professionalism, exchanged glances filled with empathy and disbelief. One passenger, unable to hold back, quietly muttered, "This is like a movie." Another nodded in agreement, her own eyes misty. The tension among the passengers mirrored the intensity of the exchange happening in the galley. Linda turned back to Keanu, her voice trembling but steady. You say you want to make it right. But how, Keanu? You can't undo the years I spent feeling broken and abandoned. You can't erase the nights I cried myself to sleep, wishing someone cared. And I also want to say, Keanu reached out, his hand hovering uncertainly before gently resting on her shoulder. You're right, he admitted, his voice low and filled with regret. I can't undo the past, but maybe we can change the future. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. I'm here now, and I'm not going to disappear again. Whatever it takes, I'll be there. Linda's expression softened for the first time, her walls beginning to crack under the weight of his sincerity. Why now? She whispered, her voice breaking. Why do you care after all these years? Why what? Keanu's gaze was steady, his voice firm. Because I've been where you are. After my friend died, I felt like the world was nothing but pain. But helping you that night, it gave me purpose. It reminded me that even in my darkest moments, I could still make a difference. I didn't realize until now how much you were holding on to, and I hate that my actions hurt you. Please, Linda, let me help you heal. The galley fell silent save for the faint hum of the plane's engines. Linda wiped her eyes, her breath shaky as she processed his words. For the first time in years, a flicker of hope appeared in her expression, fragile but undeniable. I don't know if I can trust you again, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Keanu nodded, his gaze unwavering. You don't have to trust me today, or tomorrow. But I'll earn it, Linda. Whatever it takes, I'll earn it. In that moment, something shifted. The pain and anger that had defined their encounter began to give way to the possibility of understanding, of healing. The passengers, still riveted by the emotional drama, watched as the two stood together, their connection undeniable. Though the journey wasn't over, both Keanu and Linda knew they had taken the first step towards something that could change their lives forever. The galley of the plane was a quiet, confined space, a stark contrast to the drama that had just unfolded in the first-class cabin. Linda stood against the counter, her arms crossed protectively over her chest, while Keanu leaned against the opposite wall, his hands buried in his pockets. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was heavy, filled with years of unresolved pain and regret. Linda took a deep breath, steadying herself before speaking. "You don't know what it was like after you left. That family let me stay for a few nights, but then I was back on the streets. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. I spent nights sleeping under bridges, crying myself to sleep, wondering why no one cared enough to stay." Her voice wavered, but she pressed on, her words tumbling out as if years of pent-up emotions had finally broken free. "I thought about you all the time. That night, you told me I wasn't alone. You promised me things would get better. For a moment I believed you. But when you didn't come back, I started to believe I didn't matter. That maybe I never did." Keanu's face was etched with guilt. He opened his mouth to respond, but hesitated, as if searching for the right words. Finally, he spoke, his voice heavy with emotion. "Linda, I failed you. I thought I was doing the right thing by finding you a safe place, but I didn't follow through. I let my own grief consume me, and in doing so, I let you down. I've carried that guilt for years, but hearing your story now," Titian trailed off, his voice breaking. "I can't tell you how sorry I am." Linda looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and sadness. Keanu stepped closer, his voice low but resolute. "I can't undo the pain I caused, Linda, but I can promise you this. I'm not going to disappear again. I don't want you to feel invisible ever again. If you'll let me, I want to help you rebuild your life, to make up for the ways I failed you." Linda turned away, staring out the small galley window. Her shoulders slumped as she struggled to hold back tears. "It's not that simple, Keanu. You can't just show up now and fix everything. The damage is done." Keanu nodded, his tone soft but steady. "You're right. I can't erase the past. But maybe we can create something better moving forward. You don't have to trust me right away, I understand that. But I want to earn your trust, step by step." Linda's walls, carefully built over years of hurt and abandonment, began to tremble. She turned back to face him, her expression a mixture of skepticism and vulnerability. "Why do you care now? After all these years, why are you trying so hard?" Keanu's gaze met hers, unwavering and sincere. "Because you mattered to me then, and you matter to me now. That night, I saw someone who needed help, and I couldn't walk away. I didn't realize how much you were holding on to, and I hate that my actions made things worse. But I care, Linda, and I'll keep showing you that I care, as long as it takes." The raw honesty in his voice broke through some of her defenses. Linda let out a shaky breath, the tension in her posture easing slightly. "It's hard for me to believe that, after everything," she admitted. Keanu nodded again, understanding the depth of her pain. "I don't expect you to believe it right away. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." For the first time, Linda's anger softened, replaced by a glimmer of something fragile hope. She wiped at her eyes and leaned against the counter, her voice quieter now. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Keanu. Not yet." "You don't have to," he replied gently. "Take all the time you need. I'm not asking for your forgiveness today, or even tomorrow. All I'm asking is for the chance to show you that you're not alone anymore." The sincerity in his words was undeniable, and for the first time in years, Linda felt the faintest crack in the walls she had built around her heart. She looked at him, searching his face for any sign of insincerity. All she saw was regret and a quiet determination to make things right. The tension in the galley began to shift, the weight of their shared pain giving way to the possibility of healing. Linda wasn't ready to fully let her guard down, but she also couldn't ignore the sincerity in Keanu's eyes. or the hope his words sparked within her. As the plane continued its journey to New York, the two stood in the galley, their conversation drifting from the past to the possibilities of the future. Linda still had doubts, still carried scars that would take time to heal, but for the first time in years, she felt the faintest flicker of trust, a small but significant step toward letting someone in again. In the quiet of the plane, away from the curious eyes of the passengers, Linda and Keanu took the first tentative steps toward forgiveness, understanding, and perhaps even redemption. Neither of them knew what the future would hold, but in that moment, they both realized they were no longer alone in facing it. As the plane began its descent into New York, the atmosphere between Keanu and Linda had shifted. In the galley, away from the prying eyes of the other passengers, the emotional storm that had erupted between them began to settle into something quieter, more introspective. The pain and anger that had defined their initial confrontation were still present, but they were no longer barriers. The spiked chairs had become their permanent positions on the flight. Instead, they became the foundation for a deeper connection, one rooted in understanding and a mutual desire to heal. Keanu broke the silence first, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. "Linda, I know words alone can't fix what you've been through, but I want to do more than just apologize. I want to help you rebuild, to give you the opportunities you deserve." Linda looked at him, her expression skeptical but softer than before. "What do you mean?" Keanu leaned forward slightly, his gaze unwavering. "Come to Los Angeles. Let me help you. I know people who can provide resources, counseling, and support, whatever you need to get back on your feet. I can introduce you to friends who've been through similar struggles and come out stronger. You don't have to go through this alone anymore." Linda hesitated, her mind racing. The idea of starting over, of accepting help, was both terrifying and tantalizing. She had spent so many years relying on herself, building walls to protect against disappointment. Letting someone in, even someone as sincere as Keanu, felt like a monumental risk. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice trembling. "It's hard to trust that things will be different this time." "So," Keanu nodded, his expression filled with understanding. "I get that. Trust takes time, and I'm not asking you to make a decision right now. But I want you to know that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Whatever you need, whenever you're ready, I'll be there." Linda glanced out the small galley window, her thoughts swirling. For years, she had carried the pain of abandonment, the belief that no one cared enough to stay, but here was Keanu, not just apologizing, but offering to stand by her, to help her rebuild her life. It was a glimmer of something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. As the plane touched down, the realization began to sink in. She didn't have to carry the weight of her past alone anymore. While her wounds wouldn't heal overnight, she felt the faintest flicker of trust. Keanu's actions, not just his words, were starting to prove that he genuinely cared. The two walked off the plane together, their conversation continuing as they made their way through the terminal. Keanu listened intently as Linda opened up about her journey, how she had survived homelessness, navigated a broken foster care system, and eventually found stability as a flight attendant. Her voice carried a mix of pride and pain, the scars of her past evident, but not defining. "You've been through so much," Keanu said, his voice filled with admiration. "You're stronger than you realize, Linda. To come through all that and still be standing here today, it's incredible." Linda let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "Most days, I don't feel strong. I feel broken. Like I've been holding myself together with duct tape and prayers." Keanu stopped walking, turning to face her. "Broken pieces can still make something beautiful," he said quietly. "Maybe even stronger than before. You've survived so much, Linda, and that says something about the person you are. You don't have to have it all figured out right now. Let me help you carry some of that weight." For the first time, Linda felt herself starting to believe his words. She wasn't ready to fully trust him, not yet, but she was willing to take a step forward. "I'll think about it," she said finally, her voice hesitant but steady. Keanu smiled, the kind of smile that offered reassurance without pressure. That's all I can ask for. In the days and weeks that followed, Linda and Keanu began to rebuild their connection, one conversation at a time. Keanu kept his word, introducing her to friends in Los Angeles who could offer support and resources. Linda, in turn, began to open up, not just about her pain, but also about her dreams she had long buried beneath the weight of survival. Their bond grew stronger, not through grand gestures, but through small, meaningful acts of trust and understanding. Emily found herself laughing more, reflecting less on her past wounds and more on the possibilities of the future. Keanu, too, found healing in their connection, a sense of redemption for the promise he had once broken. One evening, as they sat on a quiet park bench overlooking the ocean, Linda turned to Keanu with tears in her eyes. "You didn't just save my life that night," she said softly. "You saved it again when you decided to care this time." Keanu reached out, taking her hand gently. "And you saved mine by giving me the chance to make it right." Their story didn't end with perfection or fairy tale resolutions. It ended with something far more meaningful. A rekindling of hope, the healing of old wounds, and the promise of a future built on trust and mutual understanding. Together, they proved that, even in the face of brokenness, it's possible to create something beautiful and unbreakable. The story of Keanu Reeves and Linda is a powerful reminder of how a single moment can change lives, both for better and worse. What began as an emotional confrontation on a flight revealed a past filled with pain, broken promises, and a desperate need for healing. Through vulnerability and heartfelt honesty, Keanu and Linda faced their shared history, turning pain into an opportunity for redemption and understanding. Their journey wasn't easy. Forgiveness doesn't happen overnight, and rebuilding trust is a gradual process. It takes effort, sincerity, and the willingness to confront difficult truths. But as Linda and Keanu demonstrated, even broken connections can be repaired with time, patience, and compassion. This isn't just a story about a celebrity and a flight attendant. It's about the resilience of the human spirit and the power of hope. What about you? Have you ever experienced a moment of unexpected redemption or a chance to rebuild trust? We'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. If this story moved you, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Real Life Stories for more inspiring and heartfelt narratives. Join us as we continue to explore the moments that shape our lives and remind us of the strength we all carry within.